Hello guys, it's Robbie here, and in this recap I'm going to break down EU, then in the next video I'm going to break down GU about today's London session, because actually it was a really good, in terms of price action it was a good session. It couple entry opportunities showed up, but almost everything was no tag, and I missed a possible EU entry because I didn't realize the liquidity take for the higher time frame zone, but I will break it down in this recap. So yeah, let's start everything on the 4-hour time frame. What happened on the 4-hour time frame? Well, that in-depth explanation is not really necessary. There was a 4-hour demand mitigation. Price has made a small person mitigation on it, but beforehand, with the small person mitigation, price has made a breakout structure, which actually happened from this 4-hour week supply. As you can see, everything on the 4-hour week supply after the second touch on this 4-hour week supply, price has printed a literally perfect liquidity for the longs, but this liquidity pool is here for this reason. Possibly price has to mitigate this demand down here in order to sweep this liquidity from the upside. But until a deeper demand mitigation right here, we can expect the continuation of this slow bearish movement, bearish pullback to the downside. So technically that's all on the 4-hour time frame. I was expecting slow continuations to the downside down to this demand area. All right, on the 15-minute time frame, well, I had some scenarios in my mind before the session, which actually opened with this candle right here. As you can see, price has printed a huge candle just at the beginning of the session. So before the session, price was somewhere around here. There was the last recent breakout structure. Actually, there was the last recent breakout structure on the 15-minute time frame, which also caused the 15-minute swing breakout structure, as you can see. And price has made a deeper mitigation on this 15-minute demand. But this 15-minute demand, 50% has been already mitigated right here. So technically, price wasn't coming from any valuable area from this point, and that's the reason I was expecting the breakout structure here. That's why I marked a pending breakout structure at this point. And after the reversal right here, technical price reacted on this demand that has caused the break of this supply that has caused the breakout structure here, but price action was a bit slow at this point. And technically, I was expecting a confirmation entry on this supply, and after this supply zone mitigation, I was expecting a breakout structure. Or if this supply won't be strong enough to hold the price, then I would expect a breakout structure from this supply, which was the origin of the previous breakout structure movement to the downside. So I was expecting a breakout structure here too. And also there was in mind, I was expecting a possible confirmation entry on this supply area right here. And after this supply zone mitigation, if a confirmation entry showed up, I was expecting a continuation to the downside. However, if a flip happened on this zone, I would look for longs in order to sweep all of this liquidity right here, because if you take a look at this point, technically this is just perfect liquidity, perfect 15-minute liquidity below the huge 4-hour liquidity pool. But technically this whole movement is just a huge liquidity pool in this case, especially on the upside. So that's why I was expecting longs after the flip of this supply area right here, which has caused really nice volume candles too. And yeah, but as you can see, price has broken above this 15-minute supply area. So why I did not look for longs, because actually I had a sell limit on this 1-minute area right here. Well, if you take a look at this price action right here, as you can see, technically this is just a huge liquidity pool. And this huge liquidity pool right here has been built up for this 15-minute wick area, which has been made after the sweep of this liquidity. There was liquidity sweep, there was liquidity built up, which has been swept by this movement, and new orders have been opened, have been placed into the market from this supply area after the sweep of this liquidity. So there were liquidity which has been swept out with this high point, with this movement, and after that price has built up more liquidity right here for this 15-minute weak supply area. And after this huge reaction, because this was a perfect V-shaped recovery right here, I was expecting sells down to this area, down to this low point. I was expecting a breakout structure on this low point because once again, this low point didn't mitigate any valuable demand area. So it means it could function as liquidity for the future movement. So this was the last recent area, last possible area where I was waiting for a confirmation entry, and this huge reaction convinced me for the possibility of this short. But after the break of this zone, I marked out this 15-minute demand right here, which has caused the flip of this zone, which has caused a direct break of this zone, and technically this demand caused the flip and a sweep of this liquidity from this region. So yeah, that's all on the 15-minute time frame. That's why I was looking for sells at this point. On the 5-minute time frame, I will talk about the 5-minute time frame later when I broke down the no tag right here. So let's go to the 1-minute time frame, and here is the no tag. All right. This was the position that I had on EU, and as you can see, I was targeting this low point right here. I was expecting a breakout structure on this low point. Well, you can see that here was the huge liquidity sweeping movement from this region. This whole liquidity pool has been swept into this 15-minute wick area, which was a 5-minute supply too. We could use the full candle in this case, but the real supply was the wick. All right, and you can see that here is an even greater picture about the liquidity pool which has been swept by this movement, and after that new orders have been placed into the market on this high point, on this supply zone. All right, so let's get back to the 1-minute time frame, and you can see that here is the really nice reaction after the sweep of this huge liquidity pool. Price has changed character technically on 2 places, so a strong change of character happened too. But this movement right here was 100% efficient. There wasn't any supply area at this point, and the only supply in this case was the origin, which was the extreme of this whole character changing movement to the downside. And price also built up some liquidity below it. So this liquidity was the last point for me that has convinced me enough to set a limit order on this 1-minute area. I was waiting for liquidity creation in this case, and technically this was the liquidity which has been created for this 1-minute area, and I was really expecting a mitigation of this doji candle right here, which was the extreme of this character changing movement after this 15-minute 5-minute supply zone mitigation, and I was expecting the sweep and a breakout structure on the downside, and I was expecting a sweep of this low point technically. And yeah, I would target 15.6 risk reward ratio in this case, but let's count the criteria first. The first one was the higher time frame zone mitigation. Second one was the liquidity take for the higher time frame zone. All right, there was inefficiency for the entry POI, perfect. And technically we were in a still bearish order flow, bearish trend. However, it wasn't that clear. So if we take a look on the 15-minute time frame with this huge bullish movement to the upside, price has broken about several high points. So it wasn't that clear to say that it was a pro trend, but I was really expecting, and I was sticking to the higher time frame plan, which was the slow pullback down to this demand area. And technically on the 4-hour time frame, price has just mitigated a 15-minute supply area change character here to the downside. After that, price has swept some liquidity from this region with this huge wick. After that, price has changed character once again to the downside, built up liquidity here, swept it with this movement. There was liquidity creation, swept it with this movement. So I was expecting continuation to the downside, breakout structure, and after that liquidity creation, sweep, and continuation to the downside. So that was my expectations for this trade, and that's why I counted the pro trend criteria in this case, but it wasn't that clear. I can say that it wasn't that clear. So yeah, that was change of character after the higher time frame zone mitigation. Price has changed character with the V-shaped recovery. So V-shaped recovery was there too. At this point, right here, price wasn't coming from an opposite-sided zone, but after the mitigation of this zone, I did not have that criteria, but there was liquidity target on the downside. There was liquidity, this low point was liquidity, didn't mitigate any valuable demand. That also, technically, it's a middle of nowhere reversal, which will function as liquidity for the future movements. So let me count it as the 7th criteria. The 8th criteria was the 50% mitigation. At this point, price mitigated the higher time frame area, but immediately flipped it. So after the flip, technically I decided to delete my order here, but at this point, when I had my order on this 1 minute zone, price wasn't coming from an opposite sided zone. There was combined liquidation too, which was the 10th criteria, but I did not count the corrective pullbacks from pro movements, because if you take a look on the 15-minute time frame, there is no huge difference between the bullish and bearish movements. So yeah, you can see volume bearish movements, volume bullish movements, volume bearish movements, volume bullish movements. So I did not count that criteria. It wasn't that clear, so I decided to not count it, but I still had 10 criteria in this case, which was enough for me in order to set a limit order on this 1 minute entry zone. And also this huge liquidity sweep was enough for me. It came with me after this character changing movement to set a limit order here. But the last point for me was this combined liquidation criteria, which was the 10th for me, in order to set a limit order here. And after this combined liquidation has been formed below the entry POI, I decided to set a limit order at the 50% with 2.5 pips upless. And I would target this low point, this middle of nowhere reversal right here for 15.630 ratio. And as you can see, the plan technically played out perfectly. It would hit my TP, but I wasn't in. I left behind here with a no tag on this 1 minute entry POI, but that's perfectly fine. That's all. And let me break down the missed entry opportunity where I could break, where I could book some partial probably, but I didn't realize the higher time frame liquidity take, which has happened actually after the break of this 15-minute demand area. This 15-minute demand area once again has flipped this supply right here and broke above the next supply, which has caused breakout structure before. And you can see that the break and the flip of the zone actually happened. And there was a 5-minute supply area. Here on the 15-minute time frame, there was a clear 15-minute area, which was the origin of this demand breaking movement. So yeah, that's all on the 15-minute time frame. But on the 5-minute time frame, we can find a clear mitigation of this demand. Actually, there was a 5-minute refinement of the 15-minute demand. This 5-minute demand has been mitigated right here, price reacted right, and after the reaction it has been flipped, which has happened from this wick area right here. As you can see, this wick area caused the flip of this 5-minute refinement, caused the break of the 15-minute demand too, because the 15-minute candle at this point closed below the 15-minute demand. And I was expecting a confirmation entry on this flip area or on this 15-minute supply area, but actually the confirmation entry happened on this 5-minute wick area. If you take a look at this point, after price couldn't really manage to make a breakout structure on this low point, but reversed with down upside, price created liquidity here. So there was the second touch of the trendline liquidity. Here was the first touch, and here was the third touch. Here was the first, second, third touch of this trendline liquidity right here that I did not realize in time. I was focusing on some equal highs, triple tops, and I didn't realize it happens sometimes. It happens sometimes. I wasn't focused 100%, but yeah, it happens. So after the mitigation of this zone, technically the last recent breakout structure happened here, which has happened from this 1-minute demand. And this 1-minute demand, as you can see, has been broken with this movement to the downside with a really nice V-shaped recovery. 15-minute candle closed inside of this zone, but on the 5-minute time frame, 5-minute candles closed inside of this zone, so there wasn't any break on this 5-minute supply area. And after this character changing movement, I did mark this 1-minute zone out right here, but I was waiting for liquidity creation for this entry POI because I didn't realize this liquidity. But after this huge reaction happened, after the mitigation happened on this confirmation entry zone, I have just realized that there was liquidity below the 5-minute weak supply area, and it would have been a perfect continuation setup in this case. Not a direct continuation type 2 setup, but it would have been a perfect continuation of this bearish movement to the downside on this 5-minute supply area. But yeah, I missed it. It would have been a really nice entry opportunity with probably 9 criteria, because there wasn't combined liquidation for the entry POI, and the corrective pullback strong pro movements criteria weren't there for the exact same reason why I did not count here. So these two were the missing criteria in this case. And yeah, it had 9 criteria, but I did not realize this liquidity pool once again. So I had 8 criteria in this case, which is not enough for me in order to enter any trade. And yeah, but you can see the reaction, the footprint of the price action, that it was a valid entry opportunity. Price reacted on it and instantly reversed to the downside. I would probably target this low point right here, or maybe targeting the breakout structure line here. So I would probably close some partial at this point at 6 or 5 risk reward ratio. But after that, after a reversal has started here, price built up liquidity for this 15-minute supply area, where I was expecting a confirmation entry, or if a flip happened here, then I would expect the continuation to the upside. But when this liquidity has been formed, we had 30 minutes left from the session, which wasn't enough for the price to present anything else, and price action has really slowed down in the last half an hour of the session. So technically that's all on EU. Let me stop the recording and let me record GU. So be right back.